Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I'm your host, Sarah K. Heater. Big Brave Business is a podcast where we challenge the status quo of traditional business practices. So if you're ready to challenge norms, rewrite the rules, and redefine what it means to lead with courage and integrity, then grab a notebook and let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I am really interested to dig into this topic this week. I am joined by guest Jessica Parr. She is an online business mentor for visionary women desiring to lead rich lives in more ways than just their bank accounts. She's on a mission to help female entrepreneurs do the inner work required to transform their external reality and build revolutionary businesses that change lives. Welcome to Big Brave Business, Jessica.
Hi, Sarah. I'm so excited to be chatting with you today.
Yeah, me too. So we're going to talk about really this theme of self-abandonment and how this shows up. And I feel like in all aspects of our life, but especially like we say all the time on this podcast, everything that you either are dealing with or are not dealing with is going to come up in entrepreneurship. That's part of the game of it. I'm just curious to start with, from your perspective, what is self-abandonment in the first place?
I love that we're talking about this because it is so applicable to life and business, like you said. And I honestly feel as female entrepreneurs too, everything that happens in our normal day-to-day lives really is a reflection in our business. And for me, self-abandonment is the suppression or rejection or certain thoughts and parts of ourselves that we tend to ignore, or maybe I think you'll hear a lot of people explain it in a way of saying no when you want to say yes, or saying yes when you want to say no, but it goes so much deeper than that. It's almost governed by a belief that other people's time, energy, and emotions are more important or to be put before our own. And I think sometimes even as women, it's masked as selflessness, but it's really an issue of conditioned safety. It's like the people pleasing and really wanting to feel like we're accepted and people like us and people aren't going to leave us. And when it comes to our businesses, it is highly applicable and it can be a big problem. So I love that we're diving into it today.
Yeah. I love that you said you can look at this as a really easy go-to example of saying yes when you mean no and no when you mean yes, but it is deeper than that, because I think that makes it really accessible for what we're talking about. It feels like this big concept, and maybe if you're generally a confident, or especially like an extroverted person, you may think, oh, that's not me. I'm not a person who struggles with this. And then when you can use a really basic example like that, it's, oh yeah, literally everyone has this sometimes. And I feel like for me, what it really reminded me of when I saw your info come across of wanting to talk about this on the podcast, what really jumped into my head is that something I've shared on this podcast before is like, when you're first starting out, I feel like in business, you're turning to everybody for answers. What am I supposed to be doing? How am I supposed to be doing it? And I came to this point for myself where I realized, and now I tell people this all the time, you already have everything you need inside of you. And it's not that a coach can't help you. I'm not saying that, or that like a mentor can't help you, or obviously I'm a service provider. I think service providers can be very helpful. There's a consultants, like there's all kinds of people who can support you, but knowing, and I think for me, I really had to turn off, like I did an entire year of not buying any consulting or coaching because I was like, I need to focus on what I already know to be true. And it gets so muddied when you're listening to everyone else. So for me, that is like a big way that it shows up, where I start to get confused about what it is I actually know and what I guess to say what I'm letting myself believe, or what the story I'm telling myself is. It's, you already know so many things. Anyways, that's how it tends to show up for me. And I just keep coming back to this idea of I already have everything I need inside of me, and like really coming back to that. But I'm curious, like, how does it show up for you?
Yeah. As you say that, and I'm an online business mentor for women, right? And what I find myself saying often is, okay, do you really need someone to tell you what to do, or do you need someone to remind you of what you already know? That's the epitome of my work, right? Like I'm certainly the same, where especially at the beginning of my business, So I've pivoted online for now a couple years, but previously I was a professional in the equestrian sport. So I did that professionally, but I also coached performance athletes. So I had a lot of clients that were competitive. I've been in the coaching space, but from different places. And with that and starting there were so many times where I essentially outsourced my decision making to other people, where it was like, what's going to keep the clients happy, even though deep down, maybe I know this isn't the best decision, or there's maybe some toxic relationships in the business that need to be dealt with, or having empowered conversation around where I would avoid that, or I would let other people handle it. Or even when it comes to, this is a huge piece, but self-abandonment plays a huge role in our ability to sell and our ability to charge appropriately, our ability to have really confident conversations with clients around money. So I suffered in that department as an entrepreneur growing up, building my business as I was solidifying my identity. And I think this is what you were saying was sometimes we aren't entirely sure of what we want or where we're going, or we think that. And it just has to do with this massive level of self-awareness. For me, in my business today, it still comes up. It's always a work in progress. I think it's still to this day easier for me to dive into supporting my clients and having a deep level of compassion for them. When I want to do that for myself, sometimes it's challenging. And I find that it's probably the same for a lot of people who work with clients in the same capacity, where we find it easy to help people through certain issues and empathize with them and feel compassionate towards them and help and support them and get them to where they want to go. And then all of a sudden, when it comes to doing that for ourselves, we're like, oh, no, we're hard on ourselves. And so that's where it comes up for me. But in my previous experience, I ran myself into the ground with that business because I was completely disconnected from self and my intuition and what I really wanted, until I burnt out like really badly. And that was the catalyst for change and pivoting in my business. So I'm very familiar with the concept, but I think it shows up in so many different ways for so many different people.
Yeah. I'm curious too. So I feel one thing that's been interesting for me is I am a lifetime member of Girl Scouts. I've been really involved with a lot of different elements of supporting volunteers and girls in Girl Scouts and led a troop. And one thing that's really interesting to me is working on this whole concept of self-awareness and your intuition and knowing what feels right and feels wrong for you in your body from the time you are literally like a baby, and how that's drilled out of us from the time we are babies also. And witnessing that in Girl Scouts, like working with the girls and trying to help them with building kind of some self-awareness and whatnot, especially into middle school and high school, but seeing this self-abandonment start as early as like third grade, you start to see. And I think the statistics show that, and I do not have a source for this, that's why I'm going to say I think the statistics show, even though I know that this is what I know, but I do not have a source, so take it as conjecture, that girls are like leading, they're at the forefront of leadership in academics and extracurriculars until the age of 8, and that's the peak of their leadership, and that actually starts to tank after age 8. And I can say that in my experience working with girls, I definitely witnessed that. And I'm not trying to say, to be fair, that people of all genders do not struggle with self-abandonment. That is 100% for certain. Everybody does, and it looks different depending on lived experience. But I'm really particularly fascinated why, as women in business, both of us as women in business, and we work with a lot of other women in business, why do women in particular struggle with trusting ourselves and with self-abandonment?
That's amazing. And that I'm trying not to cry as you say that, because it's so real and it lands so well, I think, for anyone who's grown up identifying as a girl or a woman. And I think there's just this, we're raised with a certain level of conditioning and societal expectation that martyrs self-abandonment. And I've made content around this. I've talked about this because I have an 8-month-old, and he reminds me how we are born like so uninhibited. We love our reflection. We literally do anything and look around for an applause. We expect to be loved. We're expecting people to laugh at us being enthusiastic and silly. And it's just like this, there's no filter. It is just pure true intoxicating self love. And we don't have any kind of, I have to earn respect, I have to earn love, I have to earn attention until a certain level of when we can take in our surroundings. But I do think that just the way that we grow up as little girls and the way that we're treated and the people we're around and the way that almost sometimes society is structured creates this all of a sudden this disconnect where we start hiding those pieces of ourselves, feeling instead of excitement and expectation, we feel shame. We feel shame about expressing ourselves. We feel sometimes that we have to do certain things to be considered kind and good and well behaved and smart. And so pretty, of course. And then there's all of these things that then come into play in adolescence where we lose our ability to just love who we are in the mirror as we are and how we want to act and say what we want to say. And so it's unfortunate, but for me, like personally, as my experience is that I wasn't connected to that version of myself until I was like 27 again. It's a whole like coming back to self experience. And I would be interested to hear your take on what that
Yeah.
feels like.
Yeah, I was definitely gonna go the same direction of shame, but I am so fascinated with the correlation to self-love because even though it seems like as I am thinking this through and listening to you, that shame and self-love do seem like they are two sides of the same coin. I honestly hadn't really thought about that as it had to necessarily be linked to self-love, and that this idea of self-abandonment definitely rooted for me in my initial assumptions going into this conversation, definitely in shame. And the fact that, especially for girl children, that we're taught, to your point, be smart but not too smart, be pretty but not too pretty, be talented but not too talented, right? You want to come in at the middle of the pack of things. You don't want to be last, but you don't want to be first. And you want to be eager but not over eager. And you want to be people pleasing, but not in a throw rug kind of way. Like,
There's nothing you can do right. Yeah.
correct. Unless you come in the middle and you don't draw attention to yourself and you're just like quiet when you're meant to be quiet and you are supportive to other people and you help them and you're there to be helpful. And you learn this from the time you are as early as like preschool and kindergarten. We're seeing this in kids, but girls especially, getting rewarded for playing this role. And I feel similarly, you could go to boy children from the time they're really little. I'm thinking of your 8-month-old. My best friend has a 16-month-old. And so I'm thinking about little kids and her son. I was just visiting with her this weekend. So I was spending a lot of time with him and just watching him just cruising all over the place and imitating everything and talking up a storm at this point. And I'm just like, it's amazing how fast the growing happens. But what's so interesting is then we also do this thing with boy children of brush yourself off, don't cry, blah, blah. And that's also teaching self-abandonment. It just looks different. And I'm so definitely for women specifically in entrepreneurship, I think it is that what's interesting is for so many of us, or all of us really, it is a lifetime of conditioning of shame that you aren't enough at so many things or you're too much of everything else. Like you're either not enough or you're too much at
Mhm.
literally everything. And that's what we have been conditioned to understand by society from the time we're little. And that makes it hard to trust yourself because you're always looking at the ways that you're doing it quote unquote wrong. And I feel like what's interesting is to parallel that with self love, because to your point, I think my journey in my 30s has been so much of no matter what happens in this life, in this world, when my head hits the pillow at night, I'm alone with me. And I have to be good with me. And actually, you said 27. I actually think probably that did start at
Yeah.
27 for me, just with like life changes that happened for me, a massive, horrific breakup and starting over. And realizing instead of spending so much time on trying to be a person that other people want me to be, learning how to be good with who I am so that no matter who abandons me, when I'm left alone at the end of the day, I've still got me, which really does come back to both self love and the opposite of self abandonment. So, anyways, I'm really fascinated by that connection. That's super, super interesting.
I
Interesting.
think if you have a profound sense of self love, that you can't technically abandon yourself. That's how I tie it together because when you truly love and respect yourself and your true identity, not the person you're trying to be accepted as who isn't really you, because we do that all the time as women, because we're taught that acceptance and belonging comes before who we are. And when we're truly with ourselves, which again, like you, it's so funny you say that because I'm sure our stories really parallel. I was in a very toxic, abusive relationship for a very long time in my 20s until about 25 when that imploded. And that was what you mentioned as well. So it's so interesting where that kind of furthered my self abandonment and distance from intuition for sure. And then all of a sudden I was left with me and my own thoughts, and all of a sudden you start having this radical level of personal development and relationship with self. I think it it's just interesting when it comes to business, because we have this, you mentioned too how you have to fit into the middle of the pack and not be too much and not be too little, blah, blah, blah. And what I find with entrepreneurs, at least in my experience and even my own experience, is that because we didn't actually, in some ways, like our true selves didn't fit into the middle, we had issues, we had resistance, we had relationships that didn't work. Our parents were, we were either rebellious or we were super, super high achieving to a point where it was like destroying us. And I find that this is a really interesting characteristic of most entrepreneurs. You're the black sheep of the family, or you're the like person who didn't go out in college and party because all you were doing was study. It's crazy when you start to look at it. So what I'm getting at is usually there's this like intuitive pull that women are taught to press down. Like, you are made for more, you are made for something big, you're a leader. And we're taught to like suppress that. And sometimes as we're going through life and or our childhood and teenagehood and then into adulthood, we find it hard to suppress that part of ourselves. And then we end up thinking something's very wrong with us because we get rejected or we get into bad relationships or our parents are like disappointed in us for doing something or we make mistakes. And so then it's this whole process of going into being an adult and becoming an entrepreneur, and the recognition of the fact that's literally the most amazing, brilliant parts of you are those parts that were trying to pop out as you were growing up. And I wonder if you have any experience with that. Because when I think about my personal evolution, just from childhood to now, I'm like, I think I was probably the person who I was really shy as a kid, but I was so expressive, like by myself or with people I was comfortable with. And then as I grew older, I was almost too much of a leader and too much of everyone's going left, so I'm gonna go right. That didn't bode well for me as a teenager. And it was still like that as I got older, and I didn't have a level of self-compassion because I thought that I was wrong and different and didn't belong and was not the way I was supposed to be. I wasn't doing the things I was expected to do. And so I actually had a lot of self-loathing and I was self-deprecating. I had a horrible relationship to self. And that's what I think happens is this, the more that society tells you that's not what we want, and you start telling yourself that, you get further and further away from choosing yourself. And when you mentioned even having this cataclysmic relationship breakup or something like that, I remember that being the first time I truly chose myself. And the part about it, whether it's a relationship you're exiting or a career move you're making or moving across the country, whatever it is that you think of as like a cataclysmic event in your life, when you choose yourself, sometimes it actually doesn't feel good when you're not used to doing it. It feels hard. Sometimes you don't even know if it's right because it feels so difficult. And the thing is, the more you do that, the more connected to yourself you become, the faster you can make those decisions. And the more you start realizing that all of a sudden your external reality starts turning into something you actually like, something you enjoy, something you feel fulfilled by. And I honestly don't believe that happens until you're like 25 and older, where all of a sudden you're like, wait a second. My entire life I've been making choices based on what other people are telling me to do. I'm outsourcing my power. I'm outsourcing the answers. And I'm just what if I just, crazy idea here. What if I just follow my gut? And the women always talk about this because the second they recognize the power of that, game on. There's no going back. There's no more of that. And it's a constant process because there is real life. We're not feral wild animals. We show up. There are certain civil things that we have to do. But as business owners, when we're doing that in our business, what I find and what happened to me and what I find happens to a lot of clients that I work with or people that I've come across and had conversations with is all of a sudden they wake up, they've built a business. The business is running them. The clients are dictating what the business is. They're so distant from themselves and they're burnt out. They're really burnt out. And what I built a business because I wanted to have my own thing and I have this drive inside of me. All of a sudden, people might pleased my way to success, and this is not what I thought it was. And that was my experience. That is something that I find a lot of women get to. And the whole thing behind that is that they're in misalignment because they haven't actually been making decisions based on themselves and their intuition. They've accidentally and subconsciously been making decisions and building their business based on those unhealed areas of their life, the people and the wanting to be accepted and belonged and the fear of abandonment, because of course self-abandonment is really just some sort of lack of feeling seen, safe, or soothed as a kid. And so we're actually abandoning ourselves because we're scared other people are going to leave us.
Seen, safe, or soothed. Okay. Okay. I just want to, that was such a good like bomb drop that I'm like, okay, wait, let's like really take a minute to think about this. Seen, safe, and soothed. So that's why I repeated. So it's interesting because for me, I would say first and foremost, my journey with self-abandonment in entrepreneurship has been less about like my clients running my business and more about how I feel
Mhm.
about my success and how I measure success. And thinking that you're looking at some toxic marketing out there from other people who came before you and are bigger than you and whatever, and feeling like I want what they have. One day I want to run in the sun with them and I'm not there yet and I feel terrible for all the things I don't have. And I think then I start looking to other people for emulating their example or taking their advice, right? Because they prey on you by creating this marketing that makes you feel like shit. And then they're like, okay, but I can sell you the solution to how you feel like shit. And it's, you're the one who made me feel like shit in the first place, actually. And that's where on the show, Amanda and I have said for more than a year now that stop spending time in places that make you feel like shit and stop following people who make you feel like shit, because that exacerbates that self abandonment. And I think in answer to your question a few minutes ago of what my experience was, I definitely was that kid that was an extreme overachiever. I was chasing that constant praise from honestly adults in my life. It was not really my peer group, and I almost felt I don't really care if not that I didn't care if I was accepted. Of course I did. Everyone cares. Like that, everybody cares about being accepted by their peer group. I'm not trying to pretend that I did not care, but it was so much more important to me that have approval from adults. And I also found that it was easier to get approval from adults. Like, here, let me be a little show pony. I'll show you how great I can do at whatever instructions you give me. And then when you give me praise, I'm just going to feel like I got a cookie. And fitting in with my peers is harder. So I'll just focus on pleasing the adults instead. And there were friends that came along the way. So that was great. But like, less focus on the thing that I felt like I couldn't do and more focus on the thing that I felt like I could do, which is really interesting. I'm actually processing this as I say it out
I
loud. And
know.
then fast forward to adulthood. And for me, I was in a fairly toxic relationship as well. Definitely like betrayal, trauma, and cheating occurring, and my confidence in who I was just shattered. And I felt so many of the things that people who have experienced all different kinds of betrayal trauma feel, which is coming back to what could I do differently? How did I bring this on myself? How did I ask for it, basically, to be treated this way or loved this way or lack of love in this way? And then also anger at, not weirdly, not so much anger at him, although that came later, but anger at the world for judgment that women who get cheated on are any kind of way. Like, I specifically remember Beyonce's Lemonade album coming out and people saying, who would cheat on Beyonce? And I remember feeling so angry at the time and thinking, you don't have to be Beyonce to not get cheated on. Like, literally nobody should experience that kind of betrayal trauma. And to put that pressure on women that you need to be Beyonce fiance? Shit, nobody can. That's an impossible standard. And so I just felt like that was so frustrating. And the anger at the world of, if you knew that it was me, would you be surprised that I was in this situation and that this is the relationship I was in? So when I was out of it, I remember telling myself, thinking all the most horrible things. What if nobody ever loves me again? What if I never get married? What if I never have a family? This and that. And feeling like, I remember this light bulb moment that I had where I was like, okay, if, what if I like lived my life independently, and what if I did, what would that look like? And is it immediately, and I just feel this immediate dread of, that's not what I want. And I don't want to be alone. I don't want to have to do everything independently. And then thinking, if I did do everything independently, does that automatically by default mean I can't have a fulfilling life? And what I found myself thinking, what was the light bulb, was, what would I tell someone I loved if they said to me, can I have a fulfilling life if I don't have a partner? And I was thinking of people in my life I love. And I was thinking, if these people I love, if somebody I loved said to me, could I have a fulfilling life if I was alone? What would I say to them? And the light bulb was, holy shit, you're not putting yourself in a category as someone you love. Like, how fucked up is that? Someone you love is asking, it's you. And it was like, okay, shit, this is where I need to start. This is the work. This is the work I need to do. And I do feel like that's carried into my entrepreneurial journey, to your point. And I think that came before I became an entrepreneur. So I think it showed up in my leadership at work, but it also, I think it gave me an advantage in dealing with this as an entrepreneur, because I'd had that like exorcism of my
Mhm.
demons that happened before I started my business. And it was like, okay, I don't know. I think this whole concept of self-love and self-abandonment is so interesting. I didn't expect it to go here. But
It could go
yeah.
so many ways. Like, yeah, hearing you speak,
Yeah.
I'm trying to mentally take notes because I'm like, ooh, that, ooh, that, ooh, this. Yeah. Okay. So you started by saying something along the lines of, okay, the comparison of success, because that's huge, right? For so many reasons, because it's just all over the internet, it's in everything we consume. And I think it's just like such an interesting topic too, because there's so much. For me, I always am wondering, is this drive in me that I feel mine? Is it mine? Do I really, am I this ambitious? Is this what I haven't separated that? I do think that I'm just inherently and always have been and probably always will be really driven and ambitious and like wanting to do the next thing. But I don't know if that's like conditioned or if I'm still trying to prove something or who I'm trying to prove things to. Like that's something I'm constantly working on. But I think that what's so interesting, the concept of success and entrepreneurship and women, because we're expected to be able to do so many things and we're capable of doing so many things. Women are beautiful leaders, and we're also like highly empathic and intuitive, and we're also can be very masculine and structured. Like it's just, and then we have parenthood, and then we have being a partner, and then we have taking care of a home, and then now we have the expectation of we need two income households and we need to have thriving careers, and sometimes we're out earning our partners. And I just think, oh, success at this point to me is, am I happy and fulfilled, and am I living on purpose? Because there is literally no measurement stick that we can hold up against one another, which we do all the time, which is really sad and unfortunate, but it's just part of life. Because everyone has this manual of life, like they have all of their experiences, their story, what's actually important to them, their different values. So how are we comparing our success to others when in fact we're not even in the same category of each other? And so I have to always come back to that and remember, am I good with me? Because, like you said, at the end of the day, the most important relationship that we're going to ever have in our entire lives is with ourselves. And honestly, motherhood, so this is a new experience for me. So I only speak of my 8-month container. But what I thought was, I had a huge fear of becoming a parent, honestly, for a long time, because I truly believed, and it's a little bit true to my, based on my experience, but I truly believed like I would not have the capacity to live in my freedom and do what I wanted and build my business the way I wanted to. And it's true, like you do give up a lot of your autonomy, but I think the realization of how powerful I really am as a human having a child, and it's like this new level unlocked where you're like, whoa, I thought I was capable and powerful and I had all of these crazy qualities about me. And then you have a child and you're like, I'm a superhero. So there's that. But when we're looking at comparing ourselves to other people and feeling like perhaps our level of success doesn't measure up, if you actually put yourself in like the box that you were talking about as a person that you love and you treat yourself with that love and respect, all of a sudden that kind of fades away. Because what happens when people, you mentioned people marketing to us in a way that makes us feel like shit, and then we're feeling like we need more answers, we need more support, or we're following accounts or consuming information that makes us feel terrible. All of that is outsourcing our power. Every single answer you could possibly have is actually spending time with yourself, reflecting with yourself, getting in touch with your intuition, understanding who you are as a person. And I guarantee there's a lot of women, especially in general and or listening to this podcast, that you might know who you are and you might be aware of some of the thoughts that you have and some of the internal dialogue that goes on in your brain, but a lot of us spend a lot of time avoiding getting to know who we really are and like truly seeing ourselves in the mirror. And I'm not talking like appearance or physical or anything inside your head. I find that so many women will outsource their power, but also outsource all of their time, give it to everyone else. Before I ever sit around and what we think is maybe wasting time getting to know ourselves, I'm going to pour into others and I'm going to just avoid, because truly I feel like maybe if I were honest with myself and I got close to who I am, maybe there's something I wouldn't like. Or maybe there's something I'm doing in my life right now that I wouldn't like and it would have to change. Or maybe there's some scary shit that I would have to face. Or do some drastic things that might not fly with the people in my life right now. And so I think there's this like level of knowing. This is why I think women are literally superhuman, because they already know that. They already know they have the answers. You already know what you want. I hear it all the time from especially clients or women that I start to work with, that I don't know. I don't know what I want. I don't know what my big vision is. I don't know exactly what things look like. I don't know what my next steps are. And all of those things, like all of those things, when you say them, they just tell me that you have been avoiding doing the inner work. You have done everything. You have learned from all the coaches. You've gotten all the strategy. You've poured time into getting your brand colors right and building your website and doing all of the things on the checklist. But have you actually just gotten good with yourself? I promise if you're listening to the podcast and you're that person who's, I just don't know what my next move is, it's because you have an intuitive knowing of what it is and it's uncomfortable. It would require you to do something that is a little scary, or it would require you to put yourself out there or be honest with what you really want. And I think we're so habitual about abandoning ourselves that we get to those places, that I don't know, I'm not sure. Somebody tell me, somebody give me the answers.
I want to add to what I would say to someone listening is, if there's a part of you that is or has ever been afraid of being alone with yourself, if there's a part of you that thinks if you were really truly just alone with you, would I even like that person? If you're wondering that about yourself, we all are. Like we all are, we all have, and that's not just you. And I think sometimes we don't even want to ask the question. Like I would describe when I said I had that light bulb moment, I wasn't ready to deal with that for a while. Like in my grieving process, it's like what the trigger was for me of that coming up, that I described it as it was the elephant in the room. I knew it was there, but I was not going to acknowledge it until I was ready. And then it got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm going to sit with the knowing that it's in the room, but I can't look at it. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to look at it, but I'm not ready to address it. I'm just going to look at it and really give it real acknowledgement that it's there. And I just took it baby step by baby step of, okay, I'm going to start to face it. Okay, let me start to ask these questions. And maybe you just dip your toe in a little bit and then it's, okay, this is really scary. Okay, this is really big. These are the big fears. These are the big, deep, dark fears and questions in my heart at the essence of who I am and how I take up space in this world. And they're freaking scary to address. Okay. So I want to say that we understand and empathize and so get it. And I hope that in listening to this, if you can relate, you know what that is for you. It looks different for everybody, but whatever that those things are for you, that's the elephant in the room that like is scary to address. I hope this makes you feel less alone in that, and also takes any guilt or shame or responsibility of like, why am I here? Why do I have this? Why am I carrying this? It's like society did that to you and it did it to all of us.
No, I think I speak from total experience. I've lived it, and I still do to this day. And I'm never speaking from a place of, and I've fixed this part of me. And I think it's really important for any woman, including business owners, to know that when the concepts that we're talking about and the fact that we're actually having these conversations just goes to show how much depth and substance truly you have as a human. Because when we circle back to our conversation about like how we condition both girls and boys in their childhood, and it comes out a different way, I think that there are many, and I can only speak from my experience, which is why I identify as a woman. But I think in my experience with men, and obviously I have a son and I have a husband, my experience there is that they sometimes lack the ability to actually get in touch with those sides of themselves because of conditioning for so long that it is abnormal. They're unable to process emotion. They're unable to even like tap into empathy at times, or they're unable to recognize certain intuitive thoughts within themselves. And the fact that you actually, right? The fact that you can, as a woman, even if it's scary and overwhelming and frustrating and confusing, I think it's also just, it is so the source of your power as a human. And I love that we're having this conversation because there's literally nothing to be ashamed of, no matter where you are in your journey of personal development or self-awareness. And I think just to add to what you were saying around the micro steps, like the little pieces of slowly turning inward, I think that's really powerful, because one of the things that I would encourage someone to do if you are dealing with this is actually just to become aware of the thoughts and to pay attention to the things that go on inside of your head during a day or within conversations or something like that, and know that your thoughts are just objectively, they're just not true. You can choose to decide whether they are or not, but you could also just become the observer of your own thoughts. And when you become the observer and you become aware of the things that run through your head, all of a sudden you have discernment of, oh, I just told myself I'm an idiot. Wait, I can choose whether or not that's actually true in the moment, right? I can rethink that one a little bit, or, oop, I just told myself, you always do this, or you always forget that, or you can't keep up with this. Okay, cool. But I might actually just let that one keep going, just like a little train. And that process of the micro awareness is super powerful, I think, for so many women. So maybe that's a place to start. But I didn't
Yeah, I feel like that's really those yeah, this was a big one. I feel
either.
like those are some really good tips, and I want to say I feel like in business, this can look like something that I say to clients all the time is they'll ask me for advice. I help people with podcasting and so I help consult and also produce shows. And my clients will say to me all the time, do I need to do this? Should I be doing this? I need to get better at this. And so two things I would say that I say all the time to my clients. Number one that I say is it's your show and you can do anything you want. Now, with that being said, I can give you advice about best practices in the industry or what I've seen or what I would recommend or what I think might be a good fit for you because I know you, because we've had this conversation. But at the end of the day, it's your show and you can do anything you want. Okay. So I feel like that is true in all elements of your business. As long as you're compliant with the law, you can do anything you want. And anybody who tells you you need to do something is selling you something. So that's like the first thing that I would say. And doesn't mean you can't listen to them. You can decide this is what I want to do. But that takes me into my second piece of advice that I give all the time to clients, which is I'm hearing you say, I need a lot. I need to do this. I just need to do this. Do I need to do this? And the reality is, you don't need to do any of this. You don't even need to do entrepreneurship. Like, you don't need to do any of that. But do you want to? And why do you want to? Is it a priority to you? Is it important to you? And why? And being able to explore that part. So for me, and sometimes you just need somebody in your life to reflect this back to you, whether it's a partner or a friend or a coach. But have mentioned to them, can you let me know when you're hearing me say the word need? I need this. What do I need? Blah, blah. And have them reflect it back to you, because I know my partner would even be such a good person at that, who would turn and say to me, hey, you mentioned before that you're trying to really focus on this trusting yourself thing. And I'm hearing you say you need a lot of things. So I'm interested in this. Do you want to dig into that? Do you want to think about that? Reflect on that. So those are two things. And then one other thing that I want to say before we wrap up here is it's really important to me that this is really an inclusive and accessible space. And we've talked a lot in terms of a gender binary here. And I did mention earlier, like, people of all genders experience self-abandonment. And I want to specifically call out that if your gender identity does not match your sex assigned at birth, that there's a whole level of socially ingrained self-abandonment that definitely is very valid and could be its entire own podcast. And I want to acknowledge the fact that that's not my lived experience. And that's why we focused more on the experience that we know, which is like being women in business. But I want to go ahead and just acknowledge that as well, that there's no erasure here. People of all genders experience self-abandonment, and it shows up in business in all kinds of ways. And the more work that we do and the journey that we are on individually for ourselves and our own lived experiences about practicing recognizing self-abandonment and intuition and trusting ourselves and self-love in all aspects of our life shows up in business and in leadership. So I just want to take a moment to call that out and acknowledge. Did you have any final thoughts before we do my favorite final question?
Oh, geez, and I already forgot what it was, so I didn't even think about it. But no, 100%. I think you're spot on with that. And of course, I think every single human experiences this to some level, and it's so important just to know that your experience is extremely valid, and there's also just absolutely nothing to be ashamed about when it comes to this life journey of learning to love yourself, honestly. So I think that's so powerful. And what you said about saying need, I think also, even if you find yourself saying you should do something, where is that coming from?
Exactly. Yeah. Same.
Yeah,
Yes. Yep. Yep.
I love it. Oh my gosh, so good.
I love that too. And if this is something that you want to work on and dig deeper in, we're definitely going to make sure that all of Jessica's information is in the description. So you can definitely connect with her and find her. This is literally what she specializes in and does. Definitely we'll make sure that's accessible for you. And now I have to know, what is something that's making you happy right now, business or personal?
That is such a good ending question. I Oh my gosh. And I have multiple things. Being a new mom is like a new adventure every day. It's like a fun adventure with a lot of exciting things and not so exciting things poked in there. But my son literally is making me so happy every day. It's something I enjoy thoroughly. And I got onto Bridgerton. I don't know
Ah,
if you've ever watched it, but 2 weeks ago, I was asking people if, okay, should I start it, or is it going to take over my life? And yeah, it took over my life. And the best part is that my son also really seems to be into it when I have it on. So I need to watch that. But no, those two things are making me happy. And the fact that we have finally spring here, it's sunny, it's warm. I'm a different human. So many things to be happy and excited about right now.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
so funny. I feel like, so I live in Arizona, and winter is the time that we're all so happy. And so now when I'm hearing that from so many people, oh, it's getting warm, and it's making me feel like a human again, like a plant with the sun. Ah, here it is.
Yeah.
And for us, we're watching the day forecast, just counting down the days until it's 100 plus degrees. And we're like, no, can't believe summer is here. But
Yeah.
okay, so what's making me happy? I just feel like there's so many things to choose from. And that's a really good place to be. I must be in a good mood today. So that's great. But
Aw.
I feel like I want to say something that actually is business related, because I never do. So, one thing that's been making me really happy recently is something that I discovered on Threads. And first, in general, Threads has been making me really happy. And that's actually where we met. Like, I've been
Yes.
so into it. And I mentioned that when it first came out last summer, I liked it right away, but then I just fell off of it. And I got back on earlier this year, and the algorithm has gotten so good, you guys. If you're not on Threads, like, honestly, it's easily my favorite platform right now
Yeah,
because it is the most social, authentically social platform on the internet right now, and I am really digging it. Now I'm sure it will get ruined, but right now it
I
is
know.
authentically social media. Like, I think LinkedIn is very social, but it's not authentic. And I think that Instagram for me is maybe authentic, but it's not social. And sometimes it's not even authentic, but it's definitely what I have been struggling with Instagram, that's a lot of widths. What I've been struggling with Instagram is that it's not very social. It's hard to engage meaningfully Instagram, but on Threads, it's simple and it happens quickly, and you establish these connections with people really fast. So anyways, that was my first like main overarching thing, is I've been really into Threads again. But
Oh,
on Threads, people were talk about technology that they love, and all these people were talking about AppSumo. And what's so weird is I already was getting emails from AppSumo. I was on their email list, and I honestly never opened them because I hate email, and so I generally, like, if it's not a client email, I pretty much don't open it. But I had never really paid attention to what it was, so I have no idea how I got on their email list, but somehow I was like, "Okay, why is everyone talking about this?" Well, if you don't know what AppSumo is, they have all kinds of different software and even courses and more, but they have software that does all kinds of things for all different industries for sale, and they have it for a really good low lifetime price. So it's something that is on sale for, let's say, $15 or $47 or whatever, and then you have it lifetime, and they switch out what apps are on there all the time. So it might be that there's something that you've had your eye on that you can get for a really good deal from AppSumo, or you just pay attention to what they have at any given time, and all of the things that you need to do in your business will eventually be
oh my
on
God.
there on AppSumo for these, like, really, so all those monthly subscriptions that you have, and I swear this is not sponsored, although hello AppSumo, please sponsor
Yeah.
me. But I am fascinated by this. It is freaky, and I probably need to be really careful about it because I just want to buy all the things. If it's that inexpensive and you have it for life, it's who even cares if it works for you? I'm just gonna get all of them. Like, so anyways, this is my new shopping addiction, you guys. AppSumo. That's my new favorite. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I loved this. I seriously, like, my mind's just going of, I'm trying to do like a corresponding blog post slash LinkedIn article for each of these episodes for season 2. And as we were having this conversation, I just kept thinking, like, the amount of blog content that could come from this conversation is insane. Shameless plug, go follow me on LinkedIn if you're interested in that. I'm posting kind of takeaways. So it's not just like a recap of the conversation, it's what stayed with me after the conversation and what my reflections are. So please go find me on LinkedIn, find me on Threads, find both of us in all the places. It will be linked in the description, in the episode description, in the show notes, whatever you want to call it. And Jessica, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you.
Oh, this was wonderful. It was such a great conversation, and I'm sure we could have kept going and going. So I appreciate you having me.
So many things. So many things. All right, we'll see you next week.